Hi, I'm Thorne, and today we're going to be doing a complete slide disassembly on a Walther P99 AS. Here we go. There's a couple tools needed. You're going to, or at least make things helpful, you're going to need a punch. Here is actually a Glock tool punch, but it'll get the job done. And secondly, have a slotted screwdriver with a very small tip. This is very useful as well. First thing to do is just safety check your weapon. Make sure there are no rounds in it. And there's no magazine in the gun. We're good to go. Now, to take the slide off the frame, you need to decock it, whether you have an AS or a QA. That's accomplished by pushing the decocking button. And to take the slide off, you pull down on this lever right here on both sides. It helps if you grip the pistol like this and just pull these levers down and the slide will move forward. Pull the slide all the way off. And we're done with the frame for right now, so I'm just going to put that over here. Be sure also, by the way, to do this on some type of towel or cloth. There are a few small parts in here, a few springs, and you don't want those to go popping out all over the place, so be sure you're on a good work surface. Alright, we're going to take the recoil rod out. Put that over to the side. And take the barrel out. Now, normally if you're doing a field strip, that's as far as we go. You clean these pieces, clean your slide, clean the barrel out, and then you put it all back together. So if you didn't know how to do a field strip, you've just learned. But we're going to keep going right now. The first step is to take your very small screwdriver, or if you have a very small punch, you can use that as well. There's a small pin in the back of the plate here. It's a little hard to see, but it's right here. Alright? Going to put your slide face down like this. Take your punch or your screwdriver, and you're going to push this pin in. With your left hand, cover the decocking button, because once we take the back plate off, it's going to want to come off. With your index finger, you're going to be pulling the back plate off. That's going to look a little harder than it actually is because I'm trying to get a good angle here for the camera. So push this in with the screwdriver or your punch. Once you have it in, the back plate will easily slide off. Alright? You're going to let go of the striker assembly, and the decocker button is now popping off. So you can go ahead and take that out. Be sure the spring comes with it. Put that over the side. Here's the back plate. Put that over here. Now we're going to remove the striker assembly. So just lift here. You can push the silver bar out, and it will come completely out as a unit. Now in this video I'm not going to go over how to take the striker assembly apart. It's not something you normally need to do for a detail strip. With a good patch and a little bit of brushing, you can get out any of the nastiness that's in there. This part, in my experience, usually does not get very fouled. So a little bit of attention here on the firing pin into that. Make sure you don't have too much buildup of lube or grime here on the plastic assembly. Wipe the spring off a little bit, and you're good to go. You really don't need to take this thing completely apart unless you're going to replace part of it. Now finally, we need to take out the extractor assembly, the arm here. And this is a fairly easy thing to do, but it have to do the steps in the correct order. Inside the slide here, there are two pins. This is your retaining pin, which keeps the extractor arm in place, And this silver pin right here is your firing pin safety, which moves up and down on a spring. To remove the extractor arm, I'm going to push down on this pin, this inner one, all the way down. And once it's all the way down, push with a punch, the extractor arm is going to pop out here on the back. So I'm going to hold down the extractor arm with my left hand with my fingers because I don't want things popping out too much. So I'll push down on the pin all the way, and you'll feel it pop on the pin. You'll also feel the back of the extractor arm. You'll see it pop out there of the slide. Once it pops out, you know you're good to go. Now, before you remove the extractor arm all the way, put your thumb over these two pins, because both of them are spring-loaded, and they're both may pop out and start going around the room. You'll be digging forever. So put your thumb over those two pins, and then push with your thumb on the front of the extractor arm here, right where the claw is. Or you can use your index finger if it's easier to get it in there. And it's going to pop right off. Put that over here. And remember, we've got your thumb down here so the pins don't spring out. So let your thumb off easily. And the firing pin safety assembly will come out. And it has a spring. Be sure the spring comes with it and that you don't lose it. And lastly, we're going to take out the retaining pin, which earlier we were pushing down with the punch. If it doesn't pop out on its own, just kind of bump the slide against your hand here, it'll pop out. And here we have the retaining pin also with its spring. Alright, now the slide is fully disassembled except for the sides. So we'll go over the parts one more time to be sure everyone's got everything where it needs to go. We have the guide rod with the spring, we have the barrel, we have the extractor arm, we have the decocker button with the spring still attached, we have the retaining pin with the spring on it, we have the firing pin with the spring, we have the back plate, and over here we have the striker assembly still all put together. Now, as far as cleaning this goes, most of it's going to be, you're going to see what needs to be cleaned, but I'll just point out a couple areas to pay attention to. Inside the channel here for the extractor arm, you might get some extra lube and grime in here. Get yourself a Q-tip and clean all this out. You can use a Q-tip in these two holes where the pins go inside the slide. And you can also run a small patch or Q-tip inside the channel where the striker assembly goes. Also, you'll find that inside the area of the decocker in here might get a little bit of grit and grime there on the edges, but not a whole lot. Usually the part that I find has the most area that needs to be cleaned is the extractor itself. So get yourself a nice brush, clean all these parts off. Alright, and once you're good to go with everything cleaned and dried if you need to, you don't want too much lube in there, you can start putting it back together. By the way, you can also clean these pins. If they get a little too much lube on them, you can clean those as well. The springs do remove, but if you remove the springs, be sure and put them back in the correct pin. Alright, moving back to our reassembly. The first step is to take the retaining pin, which is the black one, and drop it back into the small hole. And it'll sit, when you've got it back in there, it's going to sit flush. Now we'll take the extractor arm, and I find it's easiest to put the back end of the arm into place, hold it with your thumb or your middle finger, depending on which way you're going to put your hands, and then press slightly. So I'm pressing it up against the retaining pin. Now you take your punch, and the way you do this is you push the retaining pin all the way down and then start pushing the extractor back into position inside the slide. But the important thing is, do not push it all the way in. This is really hard to show on camera, so you're going to have to trust me on this, alright? We push the pin in all the way, and then I'm going to push the extractor arm in about halfway. So it's going to catch the pin and hold the retaining pin down. If you find your punch is too wide to get the extractor arm in, then switch to your small screwdriver, and that'll give you just enough. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm holding the back of the extractor arm down with my fingers so that nothing's popping. And you're going to see right here the silver is about halfway through the hole. It's holding down the pin, but it has not clicked completely into place. At this point, take the firing pin safety and put it back in the hole. It will only go in one way. So if you're wondering if the L shape is on the inside or the outside, it's on the outside, but you can only stick it in one way. Once you have the firing pin in the hole, it's going to stick up there. Push it down with your fingers or your punch, either one. And now firmly push the extractor arm all the way into place. Be sure that you're holding down the firing pin safety the whole time that you're doing this. And you want the black retaining pin to pop back into place. You may have to wiggle your left fingers against the extractor arm a couple times to get this pin to completely pop back up, the black pin. If it doesn't pop immediately, just wiggle it a little more. The important thing at this point is to be sure that the black pin pops all the way back up, nearly flush with the bottom of the slide here. And be sure that the firing pin safety itself completely goes up and down and catches and is not falling out. If these two pins behave correctly, then you're good to go on to the next step, which is to replace the striker and the decocker. Now we'll put the decocker button back into place, and it's spring-loaded, so it's not going to click right now. It's just going to kind of sit there in position. Press it all the way down and hold it with your thumb. All right? Or your finger if you're going to turn it around and do it backwards like this. So I'm going to hold the decocker button down. Take the striker assembly and feed it back into the channel. If I let go of the decocker button right now, it's going to pop back out. Alright, so be sure you're keeping pressure on the decocker button the whole time. We'll take the back plate, and if you forget which way the back plate goes, the side which is completely flat is the side that goes to the inside. Alright? With the back plate, push the top of the striker assembly down. This plastic ring here, you're going to push that down with the back plate just slightly, and then the back plate will slide into the slots, and then you simply push the back plate back into position. If you've done this right, you can let go of the decocker button now, and it will stay in place. Right at this point, we'll do one more function check of the firing pin safety. It's going up and down it's just fine. And we'll put everything else back together. Barrel goes back in. The guide rod goes back into place. One note, be sure, most people realize this, but just to point it out, when you put the guide rock back in, be sure and push it forward like this and down into the detent. All right, you can hold your slide upside down and the spring doesn't pop out, you've done it right. If you turn the gun upside down and everything just falls apart, then you don't have the spring in the right place. All right, everything's back together. We have the barrel back in, spring back in. Get the grip base. Slowly put everything back on. Be sure it's all lining up nicely. And finally pull the slide all the way back. At this point, I always do a couple of function tests. Decock it, make sure it decocks. It does. I'm safety checking because I'm paranoid. Pull the trigger in double action mode. Be sure it brings the striker all the way back and the gun fires. I'll rack the slide again with the trigger still held back. Make sure it'll shoot from reset and it clicks into place. And then finally go through both of the single action trigger modes to be sure that they are also behaving correctly. Everything's looking good. Finally, I have an empty magazine. Put it in, pull the slide back, make sure everything is catching on that empty round. And you're good to go. Hope that helps. And just a reminder, always safety check your weapon before you start doing this. And always safety check it after you've finished doing this. You don't want to have any accidents, and if you do this the right way, your gun's going to be working correctly when you're finished, and you won't have any negligent discharges. All right? Catch you later.